Most people think a racist mind looks like a monster's mind. Obvious, loud, easy to spot across a room. But that's not what the research shows. And somewhere in the part of you that's honest, you already sense that the truth is more uncomfortable than that. Here's what actually happens inside. Psychologist Henri Tajfel at the University of Bristol ran a series of experiments in the 1970s that changed how we understand human cruelty. He took complete strangers, divided them into arbitrary groups, sometimes by something as meaningless as a coin flip, and within minutes, people began favoring their own group and subtly undermining the other. No history, no grievance, just the label. Tajfel called it social identity theory. In plain terms, the human brain is wired to sort, rank, and protect. The us feels safe. The them triggers something older than language. That's not an excuse. That's the starting point. Because here's what the research shows next. The brain does not process all threats equally. A 2000 study by psychologists Jennifer Eberhardt and Susan Fisk found that when certain social groups are consistently framed as dangerous through media, through repetition, through inherited story, the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center, begins responding to those groups the way it responds to physical danger. The fear comes first. The justification comes second. People believe they're thinking, they're reacting. And then the mind does something even stranger. It protects itself from the guilt of that reaction through a process called dehumanization. Psychologist David Livingston Smith, author of Less Than Human, found that dehumanization is not a side effect of racism, it is its engine. When the mind needs to treat someone as less, it first needs to see them as less. The cognitive distortion comes before the behavior. The belief makes the cruelty feel logical. But we need to stop here, because there's a version of this explanation that gets misused. Understanding the psychology of racism is not the same as excusing it. The brain's tribal instincts are real, but so is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for moral reasoning, empathy, and override. Humans are the only species that can examine their own biases and choose differently. The fear response can be conditioned. It can also be unlearned. A 2012 study from Harvard's Implicit Project showed that sustained, meaningful contact across group lines measurably reduces unconscious bias over time. The brain that learned fear can learn something else. What makes racism so persistent isn't that people are irredeemably broken. It's that the conditions that feed it, social hierarchy, economic anxiety, political scapegoating, isolation from people unlike you, are constantly being renewed. Terror management theory, developed by Jeff Greenberg and colleagues, found that when people feel existentially threatened, prejudice intensifies. Fear doesn't make people think more clearly. It makes them cling harder to the group they already trust. That's not mystery. That's mechanism. And mechanisms can be interrupted. A racist mind is not a different kind of mind. It is a human mind, shaped by fear, tribal instinct, inherited story, and unchallenged conditioning that was never given the tools or never chose to use them to look at itself honestly. The most dangerous thing about racism was never that it lives in monsters, it's that it lives in ordinary psychology, doing ordinary things and calling it logic. If this changed how you see something, leave a comment. I read every single one.